So thank you everyone for joining us today for this student panel. We are very excited to have the discussion with students from universities across Canada. As everyone knows, the pandemic has been particularly hard on students, especially student mental health, in terms of transitioning online and being relatively isolated. And so we are very excited to have this productive discussion about this very important topic. So to begin, I welcome our panelists to perhaps give a brief introduction about themselves, their school, the organization that they represent, anything else they'd like to mention. And we can start with Molly.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I am from Carlton University. I'm in my third year of neuroscience and mental health, and I'm here representing my campaign, and it's called Stigma at CU. We work with the CCSA, which is the Canadian Centre of Substance Use and Addiction, to work towards reducing the stigma surrounding substance use and addiction.
Thank you, Molly. Jake, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, what's up? Hi. So my name's Jake. I'm a fifth year biology student at the University of Windsor. I'm here on behalf of Jack.org Windsor. We're kind of the Windsor branch of the national organization Jack.org, which if you haven't heard of, effectively it's a youth network. It's a network providing youth with the resources and the training to become mental health advocates. So the whole goal of the organization is to empower youth and give them the tools to advocate for themselves and for the future of mental health. I also am the founder and director of the Mental Health Classic, which is a series of golf tournaments that I started. This summer coming up, we're going to be in 6 cities across Ontario, and it's going to be a big golf tournament as well as a walk in Windsor, because that's where I'm from.
Thank you, Jake. Francesca?
Hi everyone, I'm Francesca. I'm a fourth year psychology student with a minor in education at the University of British Columbia. I'll be representing my club, the Mental Health Awareness Club, and also I'll be speaking for AMS Peer Support, which is a one-on-one confidential peer support service that we offer to students and staff to help provide access to resources, to just being a listening ear for them. And yeah, those are the 2 main clubs I'll be representing.
Okay, perfect. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And I think I'll start off by asking, what are some of the hardships that you have witnessed students struggle with at your respective universities or clubs? Anyone free to begin if anyone has anything to chime in with?
I can start us off. One of the biggest things that I've noticed this year is that kind of no matter what is offered on campus and to students, it never really does seem to be enough. I think the issue is that, we can support students with everything that we have, and it still isn't the support that students need, because when it comes to mental health, especially right now, there are so many different factors contributing to mental health and mental wellness, right? Like there's the stress of school, there's Zoom fatigue, which I'm sure all of us have felt at some point this year. There's, the burnout that students feel aside from COVID, the lack of motivation and the isolation, and all of that combined together, I think it's just been tough for students to figure out how to navigate all of it at once now, rather than just navigating the stress of school, or just navigating feeling burnout from school. So I think based on that, what's been proven to be more important than ever is that we need more than just mental health resources and just students like us fighting for these things. It's important more than ever for entire universities and entire institutions as a whole to be putting focus on mental health and wellness.
Yeah, Yeah, following up on what Molly said, I found that with our club, because our club is an event-based club, now that we've moved most of our events online, there's less people participating because from what I've heard, we're on Zoom all the time. And when we want to take a break, we don't want to take a break on Zoom. So for them, it's like they have school. And then when it's time to socialize, they're like, oh, I don't feel like going on Zoom anymore. So our events haven't been reaching out to a lot of people recently. And I think, like you said, the Zoom fatigue really makes it worse.
Yeah, cool. So something that's not unique to Windsor, but it's unique to only a few schools, and I think it's very prominent here, is that 90%, at least in the Faculty of Science and in most of our undergraduate programs, 90% of our students are local. So they're from Windsor, born and raised, and then they stay for their undergrad. And normally that means that they're living with their parents at home, like they're living with their family, and there's usually like a very distinct separation about when you're at school and when you're at home for doing work and focusing and things like that. And a lot of people that I've talked to have had a lot of difficulty transitioning to being at home full time, not being able to go anywhere, finding the space and the time to study, and also feeling when it's time to study versus when it's time to relax. So I kind of surveyed a bunch of my friends before this, and they said that um, they sit in their room and they do all their work, and then they just continue to be in their room, which can be applied at any university. Kind of finding that separation of work versus relaxing is something that's been challenging and kind of stressful on people, as well as balancing asynchronous versus synchronous schedules. So having both, and having some courses having to be there on time, and some that are kind of personal, like your own kind of study period. A lot of people been feeling a lot of stress about that, kind of trying to balance that. So those are a couple things from you, Windsor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, those are all very valid points. And myself, I've also experienced that it's very hard to engage with students, especially since everything is on Zoom. And the effects of the isolation of everything being online are definitely very well felt. So with that being said, as student leaders, how are some of the ways that you've balanced your own mental health while also promoting mental health on campus?
I'll go first on this one. Cool. So I think even before COVID, I was doing a really bad job of doing that. I was over involved. I was doing too much, kind of had a little too much going on. And I think the lockdown and taking a step back really helped me actually to realize that I had too much going on, and that it was nice to have that break. And I was really better mentally when that happened. And I think realizing that and knowing and understanding that focusing on one or two things and putting a bigger effort into it really helped me to improve as an advocate, and help me to feel better and be better in the things that I was doing. So especially with mental health, I really dove into we have like a little drive of workshops. I kind of dove into our self-care workshops, shared them with friends, kind of did some presentations, and I think it helped me as much as it helped me advocating. It helped me too.
I definitely agree with Jake on that, in which, like, what I try to do for others, I also try to do for myself. And I think that's a big part in advocating for mental health, because when you do talk about mental health, as much as the three of us do, we kind of understand the ins and outs of all of it. So, like, what I like to focus on a lot is making sure that I have a really solid support system set in place, because I think that's one of the most important things. And that's what we try to do on campus as well, as we try and create that support system for students. So what we're trying to do is, ensure that students have a safe place, especially right now, everything being online. A social media presence is super important. So like one of the biggest things that we want to focus on is having students like know that they're always welcome to message our account or message me even personally. And building our school communities into that support system the same way that I want to build that support system for myself personally is how I've always gone about navigating both those things at once, because it can get really tough trying to do all of this all the time and also taking care of ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, something that I've struggled with recently with trying to advocate for mental health is that I tend to be really hard on myself when it comes to engagement. So if students aren't participating, I would just be wondering like, oh, what can I do better? What should I be providing? Like I keep giving myself to them. So recently I've learned that having boundaries just being kinder to yourself really has helped me a lot. Yeah, it just made me realize I was taking on so much, and having a support system, like Molly said, is so crucial.
Yeah, those are really great points. I think oftentimes we're not very kind to ourselves, even though we advocate towards self-compassion. I think that's really important to remember as student mental health advocates. With that being said, um, since you all go to different universities, what are some of the adaptations that you've seen at your school in response to the pandemic in terms of taking care of students' mental health? And do you think these changes are sufficient? Are there areas of improvement? Um, yeah, basically, what do you think? How have your schools adapted to these changes?
Uh, uh, sorry, did you want to go, Molly?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I could say for my school, we have this program called Jumpstart, and it's for usually for first year students. It's an orientation program, and recently they've extended it to the whole year. So usually it's just like a few weeks of school when they first enter the semester, but now they've hired us to try and keep in contact with these students, try and give them as much support as we can, one-on-one check-ins. But I have to say, some students still don't feel very engaged with it. So I do see my university trying, but I don't know if it's the most effective thing because some students are more motivated, and then there's other students that just aren't as motivated to try and socialize on Zoom and to go for these one-on-one check-ins.
Carlton actually did something similar, although for Carlton, a lot of it's more department focused. So for our neuro department, we kind of set up a similar program over the summer, knowing that everything was still going to be online for the first years. And we set it up as like a peer mentor type of program in which every single first year was paired with an upper year peer mentor who is kind of there to help them navigate through online school, taking care of their mental health. And for sure, we notice like the exact same thing where some students are super willing to be a part of this and to receive that extra support. And some students haven't answered like our very first email from the beginning of the year. Although I think either way, it's definitely better to have than not have because, you know, obviously some students, it it helps them and some students, maybe it's like more work for them to respond to emails or maybe they don't feel like they need it because they're getting support other ways. Um, but you know, again, for sure, like it's awesome to hear other schools are doing something similar because I think it is important to give students the option of receiving easy and accessible support, especially right now.
Yeah, so in our community, I can't really tell you if students are accessing the services available more, but what I can tell you is that in our community, the conversation around mental health has definitely increased during the pandemic. So there's definitely more posts, there's more student groups that are focusing on mental health. There are more clubs talking about it. And through that, certain resources that were underutilized in the past, I know have been actually getting their due. So our student union and like the student union of the whole university and the university partnered on this My SSP app. It stands for Students Support Program, and I think it's at a few other universities in Canada. But effectively, there's 24/7. There's licensed counselors available through text or calling, and it's in a variety of languages. So I feel like that's something that people didn't really use a lot before. But not the university, they've done a decent job pushing it, but the student groups and the student clubs more so have done a really good job of promoting it and getting it out there, and especially being off campus, everyone being off campus for the most part, having an app, having a resource that you can just call or text from your phone, something that you're always on, is something that's really stood out to me as a really good resource offered by the university.
Yeah, that's a really good point you just made, Jake. And I see Julia in the comments saying, how do we involve the uninvolved? And I think that's a very important question to try to grapple with. Um, so does everyone feel that their organization has, in a sense, had to fill in the gaps in terms of like the school not being able to provide the resources that students perhaps need at the moment? Have you guys seen perhaps like a ramping up in activities in attempt to provide students with the mental health resources that they might need at the moment?
So I've for sure seen that we've kind of had to do that whole filling in of the gaps. Because like I mentioned before, our campaign is mostly focused on substance use and addiction. And of course, that does tie largely in with mental health. But at the root of it, like most of the things that we talk about, all of our events, we do try and kind of tune in on that substance use and addiction piece. But what we've noticed a lot this year is because our group more than others have kind of created a large social media presence, is that there are a lot of students who look to us for these resources and these like extra information and all of that stuff. Like last semester we had students reaching out to us, like giving us feedback and asking like, oh, like would you be able to talk about like eating disorders, would you be able to talk about like, you know, other mental health things, all of that stuff. Because yeah, a lot of that information isn't out there and isn't easily accessible from other programs, from other clubs, from the school itself. So it is something for sure that we've noticed, although like Jake had said, the other thing is, I don't know if this is like student specific and just with like within universities, but I've also for sure noticed that everyone talks about mental health so much more now since the pandemic started. And I think a big portion of that is because with the pandemic, it's so much easier to feel the effects of not maintaining good mental health. So I think, you know, it's good that there's emphasis on it, but there needs to be more emphasis on it. And it's unfortunate that a pandemic had to bring about this focus on mental health.
I'll go quick. Yeah. So what we've done, so in the past, we are more so a group that focuses on advocating for mental health and promoting the resources on campus rather than offering any kind of services ourselves, any kind of things like that. But as we've kind of transitioned into this current period, we've been providing a lot more workshops. We've been doing certain workshops on self-care, social media advocacy. We did one on the LGBT community um, and mental health. We did one on first generation students. So we've been really trying to up our advocacy game to kind of cast a wider net and also to kind of give resources to students that we're providing ourselves rather than in the past where we just kind of amplified other resources on campus. We've really worked to like improve and adapt and do the best that we can.
Yeah, it's great to hear like what all your organizations are doing to adapt. I feel like our club, we've been focusing a lot more on trying to create a more opportunities for social connections. That's what we've always been before with our events. Like other people meet like-minded people, so it was a really great opportunity for them. And with engagement, we would try to find. We've been putting more funds into incentives like prizes, like to support. We've been focusing on trying to support small businesses, so we'll get prizes from these small businesses to give away. And sometimes instead of workshops, MHAC, we would do like a wellness week challenge. So that was pretty recent. We focus on a different area of well-being per day. So physical well-being, emotional well-being, and it would be like a special task that you could do for the day and you could share with us if you did it or how was it like for you. So giving that engagement even off Zoom was also great, we've realized.
Great, thank you. So what would be some advice that you would give someone who is struggling with their mental health right now? Either advice that you'd give to a friend, or perhaps like a peer who comes to your club for help.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take it more from the friend perspective because of my work and stuff and things with Jack.org and with kind of mental health. A lot of friends tend to disclose information probably more than normal than they would to any other friend, right? So what I always kind of tell them, especially for someone that maybe has never experienced like a struggle before, the like a mental struggle, is that it's not just going to go away like this. Like it's something that you have to really put work into. You have to build your system, and I try to offer like to be a part of their system, but I can't be their entire system. You have to build a big team, and you have to constantly work at it, and it's not going to get better like this. But if you put in that constant work, that then you're going to gradually see those changes and start to feel better. That's kind of the biggest thing that I usually stress to my friends.
Yeah, Jake, I think that's like a really awesome thing to kind of talk about because, mental health is so complicated and there's never an easy solution. And I think a lot of people have a hard time kind of realizing that for sure. The one thing that I always kind of talk about when people come to me kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier, how we are all so hard on ourselves, is that I always tell people that, like, remember that you're doing your best. And sometimes you might be feeling at 100%. So your best could be being productive and watching all your lectures and getting everything you need to done. And sometimes you're at 10%, and maybe your best for that day is drinking a cup of water and that's it. And, I think that's okay. And it's so easy to blame ourselves for when we don't get things done or when something goes wrong. And I think in doing that, it's also a lot easier to kind of spiral. So I always like to tell people, like, whatever stage that you're at, remember that that's okay, because, it's not a race to get through life, right? And, we can go at our own pace. So it's okay to take those breaks. And it's okay if you need a breather, if you need a week or a month or even longer to do your own thing, or, whatever you need, like whatever stage of life you are and whatever you're able to deal with. That's okay, because you're trying, and that's what's important, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Molly said. I always tell my friends that mental health is not a destination, it's a lifelong process. Um, just like your physical health is not a destination, it's something that's so lifelong. And there's gonna be ups and downs, and that's okay. Like, there's so many resources to meet you where you're at. And self-care, mental health, mental well-being looks so different for everyone. I know, like, a lot of our accounts, like, we post like, oh, that you could do this, you could do that, but at the end of the day, if like eating a Snicker bar is your best thing of the day, and that's totally okay. You don't have to compare yourself to what someone else's well-being looks like. So I thought that was something really important to share with my friends.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point you just made, Francesca. It's mental health is so different for everyone, and it's not necessary to compare what is necessarily good for someone else's mental health to what would be good for our own mental health. And I think that's really important to keep in mind during these very unprecedented times. So with that being said, I think the pandemic as well has revealed, um, a lot of inequities in terms of care. So, for example, in Quebec, it's very difficult to access a psychiatrist. It's a very long process. So, what are some of the changes that you would like to see going forward in terms of mental health care, in terms of making it more accessible to different groups of people? In your communities? what are some changes that you think are possible and you would like to see take place?
I think for me, like obviously the easiest thing to say is, oh, increase mental health funding so then we can have more psychiatrists and things like that, and there's less waiting times, et cetera, et cetera. But that's, a lot of the time that isn't feasible. There's a lot that goes into changing funding when it comes to schools and communities. But one thing that I do think is more feasible is to make sure that everyone who should be trained in certain mental health aspects is receiving that correct training. So the one thing I always wonder is, why don't all of our professors and all of our teachers talk about mental health more? Why? Because when it comes to students, especially, like as much as we have our own organizations, there's some students who never get exposed to our organizations, right? Like we've noticed a lot of the time that all the different wellness like clubs and societies at Carlton, it's the same group of individuals who are following all of our accounts on social media, who are engaging in these things. And then there's still students out there who have no idea how to navigate it at all still. But anyone who goes to a university at some point, they will be in a class, they will be talking to a professor, they will be having like, they'll be in a lecture. So I think, one of the easiest ways to make mental health accessible to students is to have professors show that they care as instructors and that the school as an institution cares about their students, because that's the hope, is that our schools do care about our students. And I think like that's one of the biggest thing is, like we've talked about, there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of people just don't really know where to find them. But it's so easy for a professor to take the first 20 minutes of like the first day of class to just kind of be like, hey, like if you do need resources, here's where to look. If you need something, contact me, contact your TA. And I think that's lacking in, at Carlton for sure. Most professors aren't doing that. I don't know about the other schools. And then as well, that can also be kind of brought out to the broader community, like, mental health training and bringing that in can be something that's done in workspaces and policy and all of that. So I think that's, hopefully moving forward what the focus should be.
Yeah, I find that professors at UBC, it's really common to see psych professors post like writing all the resources down on the syllabus. But when I was talking to my friends in engineering or even the sciences, like not many of them know like the different resources that are available to them. So I'm wondering if it's the same for your universities as well, because it seems like there's quite a bit of discrepancy, and to make it accessible to everyone, it's so important that everyone gets the same information and same access.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Molly, go ahead. And then I'll go, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say on that point, Francesca, is something that happened at Carleton last semester is that there was an email that was sent out. Well, there was a petition that was going around with first years saying that they were feeling really overwhelmed with school. And that was brought to the science department. It was all the STEM students who had signed it. So it was science and engineering students who had signed it. And what ended up happening is the science department reached out to all of the professors, and they were kind of like, like we're about to be in a mental health crisis, both with the students and with our faculty. And so we need to kind of find a way to work and make things easier for everyone. We need to kind of, make courses more flexible, provide that leniency. And that's exactly what happened with the science department is we saw those changes being implemented this semester. And like you said, being in neuroscience and mental health, we obviously talk about mental health all the time in our program. But the engineering students never heard anything from their faculty, and nothing was ever done for them, even though they had also signed that petition. And now actually there's another one calling for the engineering department to kind of put more focus on this. So it's definitely something that I see as well at Carleton, in which there's a huge discrepancy between departments and between programs.
Yeah, so I honestly just wanted to echo everything both of you said. I feel like these things are characteristic of every university almost, right? Like um something that in my community that a small group of myself and some friends have been kind of trying to advocate for is increased mental health education in schools at like a younger age, but also for young athletes. That's kind of something that I specialize in. So there, hockey, for example, I played hockey all the way up. There's kind of a very toxic culture, which is kind of stereotypical hockey, but it's pretty true. Like I've had some pretty bad encounters and seen some pretty bad things. So what a few of my friends and I have been advocating for the local hockey associations is that every parent, first of all, because the parents are bad too, every parent, coach, and player before the season begins has to do like a 1 hour online module about like athlete mental health, about things like that. And that's something in my community that I'd like to see change, because I feel like the hockey community, I feel it as part of like, yes, Windsor is my community, but I feel like the hockey community is also my community. And that's definitely something that I'm hoping to see in the future.
And yeah, on that, Jake, I definitely agree that starting younger is like the way it should be, because for me personally, like the reason I'm in neuroscience and mental health as a program is because mental health has always been important to me. And that's because ever since like elementary school, grade 4, grade 5, it was something that my teachers talk about. And I still keep in touch with those teachers today, because they made such a huge difference on the rest of my life, right? Like in letting their students know how important mental health was, how important it was to speak out about these things from such a young age, it made it a lot easier to navigate through high school and university. So I definitely agree with that, in which, like, obviously it's important to bring it to universities, but it's also so important to bring it to high schools and elementary schools as well.
Yeah, in addition to that, like I'd like to see profs, not just or profs and teachers, not just talking about mental health, but actually encouraging it as well. I think like writing it out on a syllabus or like saying it in the first lecture of the first class, like that's good. I think it increases awareness, but I'm hoping to see more professors and more teachers to actually encourage students to go to these events, even if you're not experiencing any mental health issues. Just creating a community, a supportive community for yourself, just seeing what events are out there. I think that's also key.
Yeah, something cool that I want to highlight that one of my professors did for this semester. She's never done it before, but she kind of heard. So similarly in science, we've been kind of pushing for like better mental health resources, more, better access, and more awareness of the ones that exist. But what a professor did, which I found really cool, is she posted it's just on our student site. It's Blackboard for us, but it's a 1 day late, no questions asked form, and and you can attach it to anything you want over the semester, and you just get no penalty. So it's just that there's no questions. Anything that happened, you can just attach this form, and there's no questions asked. Like you're good to go. So I thought that was something really cool that I had never really seen before.
Yeah, actually, on that, Jake, that's so at Carlton, we have this program called Students as Partners program, and you get paired up with a faculty member to kind of help redesign a course, whatever course that they're teaching. So I did that last semester, and the course is running this semester, and we did that, although we expanded it and did 3 extensions, no questions asked, just because they have like pretty much bi-weekly tests and assignments, so it's quite a lot throughout the year. And so far, we've had 1 quiz due and 1 assignment due, and students are utilizing the policy, and students have been reaching out more than I found in other classes where I've done work with. Is that when you put these policies in place and when you kind of make it known again that like you care about your students, students are a lot more willing to take that step forward and reach out when they need it. And I think that's one of the most important things in creating these flexible and lenient policies, is that it lets students know that you want them to do well and you want them to succeed. Because I don't know how it was for everyone else here, but I remember like going into university back in grade 12, everyone's kind of saying like, oh, like the profs don't care about you. Like no one gives like, no one gives a crap what's going on in your life. Like you either get things done or you fail or whatever. And I went into university with like oh my God, like this is going to be horrible. Like this is going to be a horrible 4 years. And luckily for me, that wasn't my experience. And yeah, I think it's important to have all students not have that experience and not feel that way, right?
Yeah, basically professors actually doing something about it, like implementing it in their syllabus, their policies, it really shows students. Because yeah, I've seen many profs talk about mental health, but then they're not flexible in these things, and you can really see a discrepancy amongst different professors.
That was just like amazing conversation that you all just had. I think it's so true that a lot of the times, you have professors who say like, oh, mental health is really important, take time for yourselves. But then at the same time, you have profs who give like 10 assignments and they're like, okay, well, good luck, but also take care of yourselves. So there oftentimes is like a big disconnect between what people say we should be doing for ourselves and then, like the policies that the school actually has towards mental health. So going off of that, I know we had discussed it a bit, but what is like an initiative that you'd really like to see at your school that you think would do a lot of good in terms of promoting good mental health for students in general?
I need to think about this one for a minute, so go ahead.
Sorry, you can go.
Are you sure? You can go as well. I don't mind. Okay. I was just gonna say like everything that we've been talking about sort of today in terms of things that we do as our organizations or we've seen some profs do or whatever. I think it would be really awesome to see that mandated across the board for all departments and all classes, right? Because it's not enough to have one class out of the 5 that you're taking or one class out of the however many classes you take over 4 years to give that one free extension policy, right? And it should be more of a thing where it's all students get this kind of treatment, all students get this kind of leniency because all students matter to us as a school. And like, again, like these things need to be implemented on the level of every single department. All professors should be, kind of trained in handling these situations. All professors should be, taught how to care for students because, I'm sure we've all had profs who like are only kind of half there for you as a person, right? They kind of only care about like teaching or whatever. And honestly, some profs don't even care about teaching that much, don't do a great job of it. So I think having those regulations set in place would make a big difference. Of course, that's, probably a lot easier said than done. So if anyone has ideas for actually implementing that in schools, let me know.
Yeah, I like what Julia was saying about recognizing the profs that really like put in the effort to make it more accessible and flexible for everyone. Maybe even like giving them special awards or something. Like how do you teach a prof to care, right? Sometimes like if they don't care, like you can't force them to care. So it's definitely an issue that I've been wondering, like how can we get all professors to care, not just psych professors or very like understanding professors. Yeah, that's a one initiative I would love to see at UBC. Another initiative that I think would be pretty beneficial would be trying to get more men or men identifying to talk about mental health, because there's definitely less. We notice, at least for our clubs, our volunteers, our executives, most of them are women, and we really want to extend this conversation to men as well. And I think just maybe having role models, I think that's super important as well, because I've tried getting my guy friends like, come to this event, it'll be fun, but they don't seem to care as much, or they don't feel comfortable talking at these events. So that's something I would love to hear if you guys have any initiatives like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was literally about to talk about I'm ridiculously passionate about men's mental health. So I've been on the Jack team for Windsor for the last 3 years now. We have a 10-person exec team every year. We've had a little bit of like the same people, but I'm the only guy that's been an exec over the last 3 years, and no one before that had ever heard of a guy being on the exec team. An initiative at the university that I was about to say is I'd like to see more male focused marketing, because I feel like marketing in general and outreach and the spread of the information can be improved in general. But if I had to get specific, I would say especially out to men. For example, I did a takeover yesterday, like an Instagram takeover on our Instagram account. And so I was really active, like seeing who was viewing my stories and all this stuff, because I was really trying to pay attention. And it was, from what I could tell, like 80-90% female. Like there was no guys watching these stories. So I think that's something really important. Something that I've done is the golf tournament. So the golf tournament that I talked about is the mental health classic, but it's men is capitalized. So it's the mental health classic. It doesn't come out verbally unless I kind of say it like that, but it's the mental health classic. And we had 100 golfers in Windsor, for example, last year, and 80 of them were early 20s, mid 20s guys. And part of the event was every single email that they got, there was a list of mental health resources, of like prominent sites, of the Movember Foundation, of headsupguys.org. Day of, they got these packages that had all these resources listed. For the closing ceremony, I did like a little talk about like men's mental health before I announced any prizes and things, right? Like that's kind of the goal of it, and that's kind of what I want to do with it. And it really brought people in. Like we had 80% early 20s guys, and to have that at a mental health focused event and raising money for jack.org, like a mental health foundation, was really, really cool. So golf, people love golf.
On the whole, oh, sorry, Francesca, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's actually a great idea. I didn't notice the mental health part until you mentioned it.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's really, really awesome to hear. Less on the golf part itself, but more on the men's mental health. Something that I've noticed that works pretty well, because Francesca, you kind of mentioned like it would be nice to have more role models who talk about men's mental health, and more men who talk about mental health as role models. And one thing I've noticed is, you can bring faculty and professors into talking about these things, but you sometimes just have to give them a little shove, because a lot of professors who care want to speak out on these issues as well, I've noticed, but don't really know when it's appropriate to in terms of their students, don't really have the platform to do so sometimes. So what we do a lot is we try and bring in the professors that we know do want to talk about mental health, and we'll send out an email for all of our events and kind of just be like, hey, like, we're running this event, would you be able to film a short video or talk about your experience or like whatever? And we find that always works really, really well, because then we can kind of give people a nudge in the right direction. And I know like one thing that we did last semester was a 24-hour walk for mental health, in which we organized like a group of volunteers. This was part of they did a 24-hour march for mental health, but we organized all of our volunteers. So we had someone walking for like anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, every single minute of the 24-hour period. And we got a lot of our professors to join in. And I know like one of my professors, Mike, awesome guy, he did like an hour walk in the evening and posted a video about it, why he was doing it, why it was important. And he like put it on Twitter. It was on our Instagram account as well, but on Twitter it got like a couple hundred retweets. and like a couple hundred likes, because people, people want to see that kind of stuff. People think it's important, obviously. So I definitely agree that it is important to have big focus on men's mental health.
Yeah, we actually have a speaker series that we organize at the club, and it's focused on professors sharing. Like a few years back, we had some professor share his experience with bipolar disorder and just his mental health experience, rather than him saying like, "Oh, mental health is good. You should do this. You should do that." He was just being vulnerable and sharing like what it was like for him, and I think that really made an impact on a lot of students. It made an impact on me. I was like, oh wow, okay, this professor that I really like, I look up to so much, like it's so nice to see him be vulnerable as well, and it made me feel comfortable like being honest about my mental health experiences with him and with other professors as well. So I think that would be cool as well, like having professors just share what it was like rather than just trying to tell people that it's good.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your insight. That was really great. I think it's really important to have those positive role models that we can relate to in terms of feeling comfortable about discussing our mental health. So thank you everyone for your wonderful insight on that. So I am cognizant of time. We have just about 10 minutes left before the end of the session. So I would like to give the opportunity to for the audience to ask any questions that they might have for our panelists. So yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I would be more than happy to read them out. And I do know, Molly, that you have a session right after this, so feel free to just go off to do that anytime, no pressure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll hop out in like 5-ish minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
I love seeing all the suggestions that people have in the chat. It's nice hearing like different perspectives because we need as many ideas as we can get.
It's definitely, the pandemic has definitely forced us to be a bit more creative than normal. So I see a question from Easton, and they ask, are there any mental health issues that have had an intriguing interaction with the COVID-19 situation?
As I kind of said before, I'm not in a position, I'm not qualified, I'm not trained to like provide services or really to talk about different mental health issues. I'm more so here to advocate for people to take care of themselves and to promote the resources that are available. So honestly, like I don't think I can properly comment on something like that.
I think personally, from what I've seen, in terms of interactions with COVID-19, a lot of it is just has to do with isolation and that creating like an environment where it's so much more difficult to reach out to people. And like Francesca was talking about earlier, after you spend the whole day watching Zoom classes and being on technology, it's so hard to want to keep doing that. Sometimes it just adds to the fact that it is more difficult to be reaching out to people. But yeah, like Jake said as well, don't know how qualified I am to speak out on this.
Yeah, I'm not super qualified to speak out on it either, but something that we've talked about at peer support is that now that our sessions are on Zoom, it's really hard to connect with someone. Like if someone is sharing a really heartbreaking story, like even eye contact, like the importance of that in an actual peer support session, you can make direct eye contact, but then now it's like you're looking at different things, there's different distractions. So I think something very unique to this COVID situation is that barrier, like a literal barrier when you're trying to connect with someone.
Question from Lauren as well, asking about Molly's unique program.
Yeah, Anna, I'll ask her that later since Molly probably wants to go now.
Sure.
Thanks everyone for having all of us on. This is awesome. This is an awesome conversation to have. So thank you again. Yeah.
Thank you for being with us, Molly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, totally cool to end it as it is.
I'm open to hang out for another 5 minutes. So if anybody has questions, fire away. Always open. If I can while we're waiting for questions, I'll just shamelessly plug jack.org Windsor. If you're not going to follow us, definitely follow jack.org national office. They do amazing work. They're so cool. like just literally type in like jack.org into your browser later, and it's such a nice website too. It's just so well done. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, we have one at UBC too. So it's really good. One of our execs used to be involved in it as well. And they had a lot of really cool events, I remember.
Yeah, Herb, I remember you from you were at the summit. I remember your name. Ways that you can get involved with jack.org. Yeah, the person in the chat, Herb, I remember from the summit. How would you get involved with jack.org? Literally in your community or at your university, there may be a chapter. If there isn't a chapter, you can look into starting one. They're always very open to starting it. Also on their website, they have a lot of places to get involved. Jack Speakers, which Herb said there, is basically they train youth to be able to go into environments and talk about mental health. So you can go and present to schools, at conferences, at seminars, things like that. And yeah, jack.org is sick. I love it. So shameless plug.
So I have a question from Christine for Jake asking how to become involved with jack.org.
Yeah, I just kind of just I think I answered that. Sorry, like while I was doing my little rant there. I think I went through that, so we can skip to the next one.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Okay, cool. I'm not sure if anyone else has questions, so I think we're good to just end it right here. But again, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to Jake and Francesca for being here. It was really wonderful to get to hear all of your insight. It was really great. So thank you.
And thank you for organizing this.
Yep.
Awesome conversation. Very fun.
Yeah.
Would do
Time
again.
flies with this.
Yeah, and I
think could
agree.
go on.
It went by so fast, and it was so interesting to hear from all of you. So thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.
Great.